Imagine stepping onto a frozen sea, no engine to guide you, no satellite to point the way, just bitter wind in your face and silence stretching for miles. That was everyday life for the Inuit when it came time to hunt whales. These weren't small game animals either. We're talking about creatures weighing over 120,000 pounds, lurking beneath layers of ice, moving silently through pitch-black waters. And the Inuit tracked them without a single modern tool. Temperatures often dropped as low as 84 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, but still, they'd ventured out. Their radar, the ice itself. They'd scan the frozen surface for the faintest details, maybe a slight shift in color, a fine line tracing across a sheet, or a patch that reflected light just a bit differently. These were not just random textures. They were signs that a whale might soon surface for air. Some hunters would press their ears to the ice, listening for sounds most of us wouldn't even notice. A bubbling current, a distant swish. These subtle noises could mean a whale was near. In those moments, there was no room for doubt. Every decision mattered. Misreading a sound or misjudging the ice could lead to disaster, sending the hunter over unstable ground or into the freezing sea. The Inuit didn't rely on maps or written instructions. Their knowledge came through oral traditions, songs, stories, and shared experiences. Elders knew the migratory paths whales followed each season, passed down like precious heirlooms. No digital devices, no backup plans, just memory and intuition stretched across generations. This wasn't just survival. It was mastery. The land, the ice, the animals. They studied them all, not with machines, but with deep observation and an unshakable bond to the world around them. Whale hunting in the Arctic wasn't a solo act. It was an extraordinary display of teamwork woven through generations. Inuit families coordinated across miles of frozen coastline, stationed along likely whale migration paths. With no radios or phones, they relied on pure visual communication. A raised hand, a specially shaped snow pile, or a curl of smoke drifting in the sky could send signals over long distances. It wasn't magic. It was mastery of their environment. Blizzards and whiteouts didn't stop them either. When visibility dropped to nothing, they turned to their most trusted allies, their sled dogs. These animals had an uncanny ability to sense direction and danger through snow and ice. Even temperature helped in the search. When whales surfaced to breathe, the warm air they exhaled melted the ice slightly. On frigid days, this created steam plumes that only experienced eyes could recognize. It was like reading a secret message in nature's handwriting. Beneath the surface, ocean currents offered their own clues. Hunters would carve test holes in the ice and dip their hands into the freezing water, feeling for even the faintest flow. These subtle movements revealed underwater landscapes, places where whales might linger to feed or pass through. Deep channels, ledges, and ice shelf boundaries became mental waypoints in a vast, invisible map. But perhaps the most awe-inspiring tool was sound itself. The Inuit crafted simple listening devices, hollow tubes pressed against the ice, to catch the underwater rhythms of the ocean. The steady swoosh of a whale's tail could echo for miles beneath the surface, and trained hunters could even distinguish different species just by the unique tones they produced. It was like tuning into nature's own symphony, with each note guiding the hunt. If you're enjoying these deep dives into untold traditions, consider subscribing to the channel. When you hit that red subscribe button, not only is it quick and free, it also helps a small channel like ours grow. Plus, YouTube is more likely to recommend this kind of content to others who'll appreciate it too. This kind of knowledge wasn't learned in schools. It was lived, passed from elders to youth out on the ice. By the time they were old enough to lead, young Inuit had spent years learning to read the land, the animals, and the ancient rhythms that held everything together. But once the Inuit located their enormous target, the true challenge had only just begun. Spotting a bowhead whale was merely the first step in a tense, high-stakes hunt. The real test was getting close enough to strike without being noticed. One wrong move and the whale could dive deep and disappear beneath the ice, sometimes staying submerged for over 40 minutes. When it finally surfaced again, it might be several miles from its original location, forcing hunters to begin the process all over again. To approach silently, Inuit hunters used expertly built kayaks crafted from seal skin stretched over frames made of driftwood or whalebone. These lightweight vessels were designed for stealth. With their smooth underbellies and narrow bills, they sliced through water without creating so much as a ripple. The kayak was more than just a boat. It was a weapon of silence, perfectly suited to slip through the Arctic waters undetected. Hunters also disguised themselves to blend into their icy surroundings. They wore white garments made from clean seal skin or polar bear fur, effectively camouflaging themselves against the snowy backdrop. Some went a step further, painting their faces with a white paste made from crushed seashells and animal fat. To a whale looking up through the murky sea, these hunters were nearly invisible against the brightness of the sky above. Approaching the whale took more than stealth. It demanded extreme patience. A single splash or sudden motion could alert the whale, even from hundreds of feet away. Hunters trained their bodies to stay completely still for long periods, even as freezing temperatures bit into their skin. Timing had to be perfect. Experienced hunters knew the whale's breathing rhythm. The ideal moment to strike came just before the whale's final breath before a deep dive, when it was focused on filling its lungs, not on checking for danger. Imagine sneaking up on something the size of 20 school buses while it takes a breath. That's the level of focus it required. Weather conditions mattered as much as skill. A slightly choppy surface helped mask the faint sounds of paddling, and wind direction was critical. Hunters always approached from downwind to prevent their scent from drifting toward the whale. Just one gust in the wrong direction could ruin hours of planning. To mask human odors, hunters sometimes smeared themselves and their equipment with leftover whale oil or chewed strong-smelling Arctic plants and spit into the water, creating scents that mimicked the natural environment or even drew the whale's curiosity. In the final stage, silence became absolute. No words were spoken. Communication came only through subtle eye contact and hand signals. Paddles were wrapped in soft seal fur to quiet even the smallest knock against the kayak's frame. Hunters even controlled their breathing, exhaling slowly below the waterline to avoid any sound. Every action was deliberate, every breath calculated. Each person had a role. Some waited in strategic spots, ready to intercept if the whale changed direction. Others moved in gradually, forming a wide perimeter that slowly tightened. Near the edges of sea ice, hunters used the frozen boundary like a wall, subtly guiding the whale toward a trap. It was a coordinated effort built on complete trust, intuition, and decades of hard-earned experience. Inuit hunters developed an extraordinary skill, reading the subtle cues in a whale's behavior as if it were a spoken language. They understood what each gesture meant. When a whale's tail lifted high before vanishing beneath the surface, it signaled a deep dive. Rapid breathing at the surface meant the whale was growing uneasy. A sudden trail of bubbles or erratic movement in the water warned that the animal had sensed something was off. Decoding these signs wasn't just helpful, it was vital. One wrong interpretation could send the whale fleeing, and the hunters would return home empty-handed, risking hunger for weeks. When the hunters finally drew close, the most dangerous stage of the hunt began. After countless hours of paddling in silence, tracking through ice and wind, and coordinating every move with precision, the final moment required unmatched courage and strength. The goal: to bring down an animal weighing nearly 100,000 pounds using nothing more than hand-forged weapons. There were no firearms, no high-tech gear, only muscle, skill, and weapons shaped by tradition. The bowhead whale posed a unique challenge. Its skin could be up to 1.5 feet thick, tough as a car tire, but alive and strong enough to shatter a kayak if provoked. A single strike with a harpoon had to break through this living armor, while the hunter balanced on a narrow sealskin kayak, floating in freezing waters. It was a fight against time and nature, where every movement had to be precise. The Inuit harpoon was a brilliant piece of engineering. Unlike a simple spear, it had a detachable toggle head made of bone or ivory. This design allowed the tip to embed itself under the whale's skin and twist sideways, making it nearly impossible to dislodge. The shaft, carved from driftwood, stretched over 6 feet in length and was both strong and flexible. Tied to this lethal point was a rope made from walrus or seal hide. No ordinary cord, but a handmade marvel. The hide was sliced into a continuous spiral, then stretched, sun-dried, and softened by chewing. The result was a strong, flexible line capable of enduring the intense struggle between hunter and whale. The final stage of whale hunting demanded just as much skill, precision, and grit as the chase itself. Once the harpoon was ready, the line, handcrafted from seal or walrus hide, could stretch over 50 feet. It wasn't just long. It was incredibly strong, built to endure the wild, furious pull of a wounded whale trying to flee. Launching that harpoon wasn't about brute strength alone. It took perfect timing, calculated force, and steady nerves. The hunter had a single chance to strike, and it had to count. The best place to hit was just behind the whale's blowhole. Beneath that spot lay the most vulnerable organs, close enough to the surface for the harpoon to do real damage. A miss could lead to disaster. The whale might swim away, injured and enraged, or worse, turn back and ram the kayak. To reduce the chance of the whale diving too deep after being hit, hunters attached several inflated sealskin floats called avatak to the harpoon line. These acted like underwater anchors, dragging behind the whale and sapping its energy. Some hunting crews used up to a dozen floats, adding more as the chase continued, slowly wearing the whale down. Once the harpoon connected, the most dangerous phase began. The panicked, bleeding whale could swim for miles, pulling hunters' kayaks along like leaves caught in a storm. Hunters had to constantly manage the tension on the line. Too much pressure, and it could snap or yank the kayak underwater. Too little, and the whale could shake free. The battle sometimes went on for hours, with hunters paddling after their prey, cold water splashing around them, their muscles sore and stiff. The first strike rarely finished the job. Hunters had to move in again, dangerously close, to deliver more blows with heavier weapons, sharpened lances designed to reach deep into the whale's vital organs. These moments were the riskiest. A dying whale thrashed with terrifying power. One wrong move and a kayak could flip, or worse, a hunter could be caught between the whale's massive body and a chunk of floating ice. Many hunters bore scars from close calls, split lips, broken limbs, frostbitten hands. Each one told a story of survival. Even after the whale had finally stopped moving, the race against time had only just begun. Arctic temperatures, sometimes dropping below 84 degrees Fahrenheit, meant the whale's body would start freezing within hours. That posed a massive problem. Frozen whale meat was incredibly difficult to cut and process. The hunters had to act fast. Because of its enormous size, the whale couldn't be pulled out of the water hole. Instead, hunters processed it where it floated, securing it to the edge of a solid ice floe. They carved holes into the ice and ran thick ropes through to anchor the carcass. Positioning the whale just right took muscle, teamwork, and patience. Imagine trying to parallel park a vehicle the size of a small airplane in below-zero winds while standing on slippery ice. Once secured, the cutting began. Hunters used curved knives called Inuit, shaped like half-moons, perfect for clean slicing and reducing the energy needed for each cut. The cold made the work brutal. No one could stay exposed for long. Teams took turns, some cutting, others stepping away to warm their fingers inside mittens stuffed with fur. Even with careful rotation, frostbite was common. Numb hands and blackened fingertips were part of the job, worn like medals of honor among seasoned hunters. Through it all, speed, teamwork, and experience were crucial. The hunters weren't just feeding themselves, they were providing food, fuel, and tools for their entire community. And every step, from the first sighting to the final cut, was a tribute to a way of life shaped by patience, tradition, and absolute respect for the sea. The butchering process followed detailed techniques passed down through countless generations. It all began with slicing thick, rich layers of blubber, often measuring around 2 feet in width. These oily slabs were pulled from the whale's body and hoisted onto the ice using large boned hooks and thick ropes. Once the blubber was removed, hunters turned their attention to the dense meat, which was chopped into manageable chunks and packed onto sleds for the long journey back to the village. But there was a looming danger that came with fresh blood. The scent of a slain whale could travel for miles through the cold air, drawing in polar bears from great distances. So while some hunters remained focused on cutting, others stood guard, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. One polar bear could turn a victory into a disaster, so vigilance was non-negotiable. The cold Arctic climate played a complicated role. On one hand, it preserved the meat, acting as a natural freezer. On the other hand, it made everything, from tools to fingers, more fragile. Knives could shatter, and tools made from ivory or bone were at risk of cracking. To prevent this, hunters often carried extra blades and kept smaller tools inside their coats, using body heat to keep them warm and functional. As the bulk of the whale was processed, women from the village joined the effort, arriving with sleds to collect the harvested meat. They were experts in the finer butchering, carving massive pieces into family-sized portions. Their deep knowledge of preservation techniques, like drying, fermenting, and freezing, was crucial to turning the raw meat into long-lasting sustenance. Nothing was discarded. Even the blood-soaked snow around the carcass was scooped into containers. Left to freeze, it became a traditional treat, eaten like a popsicle. Imagine a snow cone, but made from whale blood, shared among community members during the harshest parts of winter. Maintaining tools was an ongoing task. The extreme conditions dulled blades quickly. Hunters routinely sharpened their knives during the process, knowing that dull tools wasted both energy and valuable time. A well-maintained blade could mean the difference between finishing before frostbite set in or losing precious meat to the freeze. As the final cuts were made and the ice turned red from hours of effort, the entire village joined in. A long train of sleds carried the harvest back home. From one medium-sized whale, enough meat and blubber could support around 40 people for nearly half a year. The danger, exhaustion, and biting cold were well worth it. This wasn't just a meal, it was survival. But the work didn't end there. Once the meat arrived back at the village, the community shifted gears from strength to ingenuity. Nearly every part of the whale had a purpose, creating a model of sustainable living that far surpasses modern recycling efforts. The meat itself was the foundation of their diet. With virtually no access to vegetation, the Inuit relied on whale meat to provide vital protein. Back meat was typically cut into long, thin slices and air-dried into jerky. This whale jerky could last through the season, offering a portable and nutritious food source during long journeys or harsh storms. One of the most prized cuts was the tongue, often saved for special occasions or honored elders. A single whale tongue could weigh up to 2,000 pounds, comparable in size to a small car, and fed many mouths for days. Sharing it wasn't just about nourishment. It was a cultural moment, a celebration of endurance and unity. Muktuk, the dense layer of whale skin with attached blubber, was far more than just food. In the Arctic, where vitamin-rich produce simply couldn't grow, this chewy, fatty slice of whale became a literal lifesaver. Packed with vitamin C, Muktuk prevented scurvy and offered a natural solution to a problem that once plagued sailors and explorers. It delivered over 10 times the vitamin C found in an equal portion of oranges. It may not have pleased every palate, especially younger ones, but it was nature's multivitamin, disguised in a rubbery texture and a flavor that could make even the toughest hunter wince. The blubber itself had another critical use. Rendered into oil through a slow, careful heating process, it became the primary fuel for kulik, soapstone lamps used across Inuit households. These small yet powerful lamps provided the only source of heat and light during the endless winter nights when the sun disappeared for months. A single whale could yield enough oil to keep multiple families warm and illuminated for an entire year. Beyond nourishment and warmth, the whale's anatomy offered unmatched versatility. Take the baleen, for example, the fringed plates hanging from the upper jaw of a bowhead whale, used by the animal to filter tiny sea creatures. For the Inuit, baleen became one of the most useful materials around. Lightweight, strong, and flexible, it was shaped into fishing lines, snares, and even sled runners that could glide over packed snow with minimal resistance. Whale bones were the Arctic's answer to construction materials. Enormous jawbones served as foundational supports for shelters. Ribs made excellent roof frames and sled components, while large shoulder blades became heavy-duty snow shovels. Smaller bones were carved into sewing needles, knife handles, harpoon heads, and jewelry. You could say the Inuit ran a full-scale hardware store, where everything, from the frame of your home to the thread in your coat, came from one giant creature of the sea. Even parts that many would overlook had purpose. Whale intestines, once cleaned and dried, turned into lightweight, waterproof fabric. When stitched together, they created window coverings that kept out the cold while still allowing in soft, natural light. Brain matter was used in the tanning of hides, softening animal skins for clothing. Whale liver, rich in vitamins A and D, became an especially valuable food during the long, sunless winter months. Some of the whale's bounty extended beyond the village itself. Communities who had completed successful hunts often used parts of the whale in trade with inland groups, exchanging meat, oil, and materials for wood, rare stones, or flint. These exchanges built far-reaching networks that tied different Inuit communities together across hundreds of miles. But the story didn't end with tools and trade. Once the cutting was done, and the meat safely transported, the community turned to celebration. A successful whale hunt was more than survival. It was a cultural milestone, honored with ceremony and joy. The moment the hunters returned, the village prepared for a communal feast. The hunting team was given the most honored cuts first, including thick slices of muktuk. This wasn't just a show of gratitude, it was practical too. After days of exhausting labor in freezing temperatures, these energy-dense portions helped replenish lost strength. In some areas, word of the successful hunt was spread by messengers, who traveled by sled across the icy tundra with small samples of muktuk in hand. These edible invitations traveled up to 50 miles to neighboring settlements. Turning down such an invitation wasn't just rare, it was unheard of. Food was scarce, and such a feast promised not just nourishment, but fellowship. Distribution of the whale's parts followed deeply respected rules. The hunter responsible for the first harpoon strike was honored with specific cuts, such as parts of the flipper, yet no one ever ported the bounty. An ancient practice called nick governed the fair sharing of the whale. Elders, families, and neighboring villages all received their portion, ensuring that everyone, regardless of their role in the hunt, had something to take home. As night fell, drums began to beat. Crafted from stretched seal skin or dried walrus stomachs, they echoed through the icy air, marking the beginning of a celebration not just of food, but of life, survival, and unity in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The deep, hollow rhythm of drums echoed across the snow-covered village, signaling that the long-anticipated celebration had officially begun. No printed invites or digital reminders were needed. This powerful sound was enough to bring everyone together. It was the Arctic's version of a party announcement, and no one wanted to miss it. Songs filled the crisp air, many of which were only sung during whale feasts. These rare melodies weren't simply entertainment. They were sacred. Crafted over generations, the songs honored the spirit of the whale, thanking it for its sacrifice. Some hunters believed that whales could hear these songs across great distances and were more likely to offer themselves to respectful communities. Instead of writing thank you notes, they used their voices, hands, and hearts to express gratitude. The celebration area itself was prepared with intention and meaning. In winter, snow houses were sometimes built just for this purpose, large enough to shelter entire families as they feasted and sang. When the weather warmed, gatherings moved outdoors. Whale bones from past hunts often formed the natural setting. Enormous vertebrae became sturdy stools, and curved jawbones created archways that framed the space like monuments. These weren't just practical, they were symbols of history, success, and respect for the ocean's gifts. Dancing took center stage, telling the story of the hunt without words. Movements traced each step of the journey. The careful tracking, the patient wait, the first strike, and finally, the whale's surrender. Children watched with wide eyes, absorbing every gesture. Unlike modern events where young ones might slip away out of boredom, here they stayed, because the dancing wasn't just celebration. It was education in motion. These dances passed on essential knowledge, skills that could mean life or death in the seasons to come. The air was filled with the scent of whale meat, the sounds of laughter, and the voice of history itself. Elders shared memories of legendary hunts, painting vivid pictures of distant ice floes and close encounters. Today's hunters added their own experiences, offering tips on how the weather shifted the whale's course or how many floats were used. These conversations weren't just casual chats, they were living manuals. In a place where survival hinged on preparation, shared stories were as valuable as tools. Special garments made rare appearances. Lead dancers might wear caps adorned with beads, feathers, or ivory carvings. Some communities had ceremonial mittens made from dried seal intestines, translucent, waterproof, and passed down across generations. These pieces weren't just decorative. They were worn with pride and reverence, carrying layers of meaning and memory with every stitch. Games kept the celebration vibrant and dynamic. Some contests challenged raw strength, like lifting heavy whale bones or wrestling matches on packed snow. Others tested the mind, requiring players to remember detailed whale anatomy or recite parts of ancestral stories. It was the community's version of game night, blending fun with the reinforcement of knowledge. Yet the celebration's importance stretched beyond the feast. Its echoes lasted for months. Songs and dances were passed to the next generation. Whale bones were carved into tools, jewelry, or art, preserving the memory of the hunt in physical form. And quietly, planning for the next hunting season began, with sharpened blades and renewed wisdom. Above all, the gathering served as a vital reminder. Survival in the Arctic wasn't an individual achievement. It was a communal effort built on cooperation, respect, and unity. In a land where one mistake could lead to tragedy, every shared story, every helping hand, and every bite of shared food strengthened the ties that held the community together. As snow fell again and families returned to their routines, they carried more than meat or tools. They carried the spirit of togetherness, the wisdom of the hunt, and a deep, enduring connection to the rhythms of land and sea that had sustained their people for countless generations. If this journey through Inuit life moved you, show some love. Like, share, and drop a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe. It really helps a small channel like ours grow and bring you more untold stories from the edge of the world.